Okay, so I trust that you guys have all washed your fabric, you've ironed it, you cut out all of your paper pattern pieces, and you're ready to start pinning your pattern pieces to your fabric and cutting. Now, if you're new to this, I'm just going to walk you through some quick things. First of all, the pattern pieces have a lot of information on them that's super important. First thing you need to do is look to see if your view is listed on here. Now, I am going to do view D, so I see it right here. There's my pattern marking for view D, but you'll also notice that I've got other views right here. Notice that they are next to an arrow, and we already talked about how this needs to run parallel with your grain line or that white salvaged edge. So since I'm doing D, I will be pinning mine to my fabric differently from those of you that are doing A, B, and C. And I'll talk about that more in just a moment. You also need to look to see how many you'll be cutting out, and I'll be cutting out 2, and what this is for. So this is for the back of my skirt. So I'm going to move this guy out of the way. This is the pattern piece for the front of my skirt, where I am not cutting out 2 because I can see right here it says cut 1 on fold. Another indication that it was going to be cut on the fold is this arrow you see right here. This means you should be sitting on the fold. So I went ahead, folded my fabric in half on a nice flat surface. I used the floor. I pinned it all down. And now I'm ready to cut out one piece of this. And I'm going to move him out of the way. Sorry for the noise. And now I'm going to cut out 2 pieces of this. This is for the front yoke and my pocket. And it's just like that piece I showed you a moment ago where it's got different means of pinning it down depending on your view. Like I said, I'm doing view D. So I want this line to run parallel with that salvaged edge. And one trick to make sure that it's perfectly parallel is to use a clear ruler. I just learned this trick. Oops, I'm sorry for bumping. And make sure that this is perfectly straight and aligned with this. That way you don't have one that's slightly off center, especially if you have a pattern that you don't want to mess up. Mine's pretty random, so it doesn't matter too much. Once it's all pinned in place, nice and smooth and flat, you've made sure you're either on the fold or not. I like to pin mine on the wrong side of the fabric. So I've got mine beautiful right sides folded inward, and I'm ready to start cutting. And when I cut, I like to have, I'm a righty, I like to have my fabric to the left side. That way I can kind of see better where I'm cutting and what direction I'm going. Also, when you're cutting, you might notice that you've got all sorts of little circles and triangle shapes on here. These are important. When you're finished cutting out your piece, I like to mark the triangles with a snip of my scissors. Different people have different methods. I just go to the top of that triangle and snip. You'll also see these little circles. These little markings are going to really help you when you're matching up the pieces of your pattern. So make sure you don't forget to do these. To do this, to break that little piece of tissue paper, I usually use a pin, and I scratch a little hole, and I use a pencil. You could use any sort of marking tool that you think is not going to be too permanent. And I usually draw a little circle there. To make sure I've got it on the other side, you need it on both sides, push a pin through, flip it over, and do the exact same thing. So I'm going to pause right there, take care of this, and then we will talk about the first steps of stitching.